Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another exciting episode. Listen, if you are enjoying this show, leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you and understand what you love about the show, but also how we can make you work harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we've got a good one coming from left field. We've got my guy, Jim Pfeifer. Jim Pfeifer is one of the founders of Left Field Investors and the host of the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Left Field Investors is a group of dedicated Left Field Investors is a group dedicated to educating and assisting like-minded investors to negotiate the nuances of passive investing. Let's welcome to the show, Jim Pfeifer.
Thanks for having me, John. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Jim, I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. So, I've had probably 4 careers. This may be the fifth one. I started in business working for a reinsurance company, and all of my journey, all my jobs have had education tied to them. So I quickly got into a mentoring role and an education role within that company. My next step was I was a high school teacher, accounting and finance for about 7 years. And at that time, kind of at the end of my teaching career, I started and I became a financial advisor. So I was doing both for a little while. And during my financial advising career, we bought a house. We built a house because our old one, we outgrew it because we had another child. And so that happened right around 2007, 2008 was when we tried to sell our house and we couldn't sell it. So I became an accidental landlord. And that was my entrance into real estate. And it's interesting because at the same time I was kind of learning about real estate, not really liking it yet, but learning about it. I'd just become a financial advisor, and I had always been into personal finance. I'd always done stocks, mutual funds, all that stuff. I was a finance major in college. So they were educating me about money, and I thought I knew it all. And as they were teaching me, I was having this real estate experience on the side. And the more I learned about money, the more I realized real assets, real estate, that's the place to be. And I got less interested in the stuff I was selling as an advisor, paper assets, because I believe that to be speculation. So I didn't last long as a financial advisor, about 7 years. By the time I kind of figured out everything, I wanted to be true to my clients. And I always wanted to invest their money the same way I was investing mine. And I was investing mine in real estate. So I could no longer, in good faith, help them. Because as a financial advisor, you can't really help people with anything but the products you have available. So I became a full-time real estate investor, active, and then slowly realized that I wasn't really a great asset manager. Now, all of my properties, they appreciated because of the market. They didn't cash flow because I didn't have a good asset manager. And I fought property managers. It wasn't really that successful, but I really was into real estate and I saw what it could do for my family financially. So then I found syndications, and that is what I do now. I'm a full-time passive investor. I run a community called Left Field Investors, which is there to help educate and provide a network for people who are trying to figure out how to build personal wealth through real estate, hard assets that produce cash flow. And we do that through real estate syndication. So that's kind of the quick overview of my journey so far.
Hey, Jim, thank you for giving us that breakdown. You talked about the different careers from being a teacher to being a financial advisor, and then ultimately becoming a real estate investor. And I love the fact that you shared that you were investing actively, but you actually weren't that great at it, having a hard time really managing the assets. You did well just because the market did well, but you at least have the awareness that, you know what, there are probably people who can do better at this than I can. Why don't I invest with those people? And I think that's something that is really insightful that I want our listeners to understand, because yes, you can try to do it all by yourself, but there are other people that have the teams, the resources, they have the scale of the asset, because trying to manage a 5-unit, well, there's not a lot of money going around on a 5-unit. So, if you pay someone, that's less money for you to get. But on a 200-unit, well, that's a big enough property where you have someone who's on site, staying at that property. That's the on-site manager. You've got a maintenance person who's full-time dedicated to that property. So it's a little bit easier to actually manage that scale of a property versus that smaller project yourself. Not to mention, you're probably going to do it part-time. You get your full-time job or other responsibilities. And, this person over here, you've got a team, you've got resources that are dedicated to the asset. So really good insights right there. I want to spend a little bit more time there, right? So you recognize that you weren't doing the best job of managing the assets. and you ultimately move into syndications as a limited partner or a passive investor. How did you come to this conclusion? I mean, were you sitting there studying your numbers, or was the deal just not improving the way you want, or how did you finally come to recollection that what, this just isn't working as good as it should be?
Well, I can't say that anything I've done is is intentional, right? It's all just kind of happens. And part of it was the deals just weren't cash flowing. And I was getting really frustrated because I had properties in Tennessee, I had properties in Ohio, I had multifamily properties, I had some in Indianapolis, and everywhere I went, I couldn't find a property manager who could handle it and really work the deal like I thought it should be. So I was constantly fighting with them. I also didn't have the right strategy on my multifamily. What I should have done is just evicted all the bad tenants, rehabbed the units, and got it going. But I wanted it to cash flow from day one because honestly, I really didn't know what I was doing. And I wanted the cash flow to pay for the rehabs. That was a mistake. And so once I kind of realized that I didn't want to start over with that large multifamily, I was just done with it. And I was fighting all these other property managers for my single family homes. I just realized it wasn't for me. And I probably would have stuck with it had I not found syndications about that time. And I realized that if I hire a professional, an asset manager to manage my assets for me, my returns are going to be the same or even better. And in fact, with experience now, they are better because I don't believe you can be an act. I thought I was a passive investor, but I was really active and passive, like a little bit. And I don't think you can be successful and beat the returns of syndications unless you have a competitive advantage. Like you really know a niche in a market in a city where you can go in and get a deal better than anyone else. Something like that. You have to have something. You can't be just someone who's working a W 2 and think you're going to beat everybody else. That's where you go in to something like syndication. So I hire an asset manager. And it's the same thing I do now when, a few years ago, if I needed some contract written up, I would do it on the cheap and write my own contract. Or if I did my taxes, I'd have TurboTax do it. But now, you know what? I hire professionals. I hire a professional asset manager to manage my properties, right? The syndications I invest in. I have a CPA who does my taxes, and I have a lawyer who does my contract. So I hire professionals, and I found out that the results are much better. I've been trying to do it on the cheap for too long, and you just pay for a quality professional, and you're going to come out ahead. Is what I believe.
I think it's great advice, and I appreciate you sharing kind of your journey and awareness of, hey, there's a better way of doing this, and we're struggling. You talked about the cash flow issue, and I can understand how frustrating that may be. We had some smaller properties early on, and that was one of the challenges when for us, the properties I managed, we were fine. But when we hired third party management and I was not managing the manager, that's where we ran into those issues. And you realize that, they're charging you for things that maybe you don't think they should be charging you for. And then you learn a lot about how the property management business actually works and how they make their money. And sometimes, there's almost a conflict of interest in the way they're incentivized to make money versus what you want as a property owner. So you start digging deep into that. And the point you're making is, listen, if that's where you want to be, if you want to be full time, if you want to dedicate yourself to being a real estate professional, have at it. But if you are investing because you want the passive income, you want the appreciation potential, you want the perks of investing in real estate, but not necessarily a second job, investing passively is a great strategy and a great option. So let's talk about that, right? You come to this realization, and you said that if you didn't find syndications, you probably would have just kept doing what you were doing. How did you come across syndications?
Well, so actually, I listened to the Real Estate Guys radio show. I've listened to that for a long, and they talk about the syndication seminar, and it sounded great, right? You just go to the seminar, and all of a sudden you're a syndicator, and you're rolling in the money. And I knew real estate was where I needed to be, where I wanted to be, because it would give me time freedom through financial freedom. And so I went to that seminar. It was crazy because I remember spending a couple $1,000s, and I thought, what am I doing? This is not my job. I'm a financial advisor. I'm spending money going to this crazy real estate conference. And I went, and it was great. What I learned was I did not want to be a syndicator. That was not for me. But that's where I learned about, oh, passive syndicate. I can be an investor in somebody else's deals. That's right up my alley because I knew if I sold all of my current active properties, I would have a whole lot of capital that I could allocate. So I had the funds, and I also realized that I wouldn't have to manage the property manager. I could just set it and forget it, right? Just send the wire, and then I'm done, except for collecting reports and cash flow, hopefully. So that's where it really hit home at that seminar that this is what I wanted to do, is be a passive investor. It's funny because I went there for one thing and I came home with another thing.
Incredible how that works out, right? You go with one thing in
Yeah.
mind and you learn so much, and you come home, it's like, actually, I want to do something completely different than where I started this journey. And I think that's really great about real estate because it's one of those things where no matter what you enjoy, you can do it in real estate. You know, if you want to be passive, even if you want to be active, you got marketing background, finance background, attorney, CPAs, whatever, you can do
Yeah.
that and leverage those skills in real estate. So it's just a great way for people to get in and figure out how they can add value to help achieve the goals that they have. Now, I know you help a lot of other people. You've talked about building community. You've got your left field investors. Talk to us more about that.
So when I was doing active real estate, I couldn't find anybody else to talk to about it. I was a financial advisor. As I said, those guys aren't going to talk real estate. They want to talk the stock market and stuff. So I I started a group because Bigger Pockets says just go out and start a group, right? And I was listening to their podcast. I thought, okay, let's do it. And so I did, and that group still goes on today. It's grown. It's a really big group. I was surprised how well it went, but I made a lot of relationships there. I did business with a lot of people there, and so then when I transitioned to doing passive investing, I thought I need the same thing. So I started what I thought was going to be a 12-person mastermind, and just we were going to have a dinner club, meet once a month in Columbus, Ohio, have dinner and talk passive investing. And our first meeting was going to be March 18th, 2020. So if you remember, that's when at least Ohio closed down for the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we never
Yep.
we never met, and we still haven't met. Our first in-person meeting is going to be actually this week in Columbus, Ohio. We're having about 100 people come out, but that's our first time meeting. So we went on to Zoom, and with that, and everyone was sitting at home with nothing to do, right? So even well-known operators and syndicators and industry experts were willing to jump on a Zoom with 10 or 20 people just to talk passive investing. So that grew. And, today we have almost 1,300 members. We have a website, a podcast, membership. We have a lot of tools and things to help. But basically, the core of our mission is the same. We are providing a community that will offer you a network and education to help you become a better passive investor, whether you are starting at zero and you haven't done a deal yet, or you're on your 100th deal. We have everything in between. And I'm biased, so I think our community is the best one out there. But what I tell people is, I think if you're going to be a successful passive investor in syndications, you need a community. It doesn't have to be left field investors, obviously. Like I said, I think it's a great group, but it could be any of the groups out there. I'm a member of a couple of different groups. And the reason you need a community, in my mind, is because if you think about it, if you walk out your front door and you're going to talk to your neighbors about finance, they're going to talk to you about their 401k, their IRAs, maybe the interest rate on their mortgage, and that's about it. And then you're going to mention syndications, and they're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy. What is that? Alternative investments? Ooh, that's scary." And my comment is, alternative investments, that's the place you live, the place you go shopping, the place you go to work, the place you store your stuff, right? All of it's real estate. And so it's not alternative, but people are afraid of it. So if you have a community, you have like-minded people that you can talk to. And when I say like-minded, I don't mean robots. We're all thinking exactly the same. I mean like-minded people who are trying to build wealth, build financial freedom through real estate, through syndications, cash flowing assets. And so that's what our community does. It just provides a place where you can network with others, learn with others, so that you can become an effective investor, because you can't get that education anywhere else. And you need to be educated if you want to be successful in investing of any kind.
Jim, you just gave a really powerful insight, and I want to make sure everyone heard this because someone asked me about my journey and my path, and there are always clues in these journeys. And the big thing when you talk about community, it's recognizing that most people you talk to are not doing this. So if you're spending your time talking to your colleagues, your coworkers, your parents, your family members, they're going to see risk, or they're not going to understand exactly why you're doing it, or it's going to be alternative, which to them spells risky. And if you surround yourself with people who are like minded in the space, they recognize what real estate can provide, it's going to make it easier for you to stay on that journey. And this is particularly true if you're starting out. And if you've got your own self doubts and you're not quite sure, you haven't done an investment yet, you have to surround yourself with people who are playing the game at this level. Even if it's just one property, but surround yourself with people who are refreshing and letting you know you're not crazy for doing this. You're not crazy for listening to these two wackos on a podcast. This is exactly how it started. And that's what happened with me. I was going to these meetups because I was just trying to buy some smaller properties. But as I was doing that, one of the women who ran the meetup, she went from 3 units when I first met her to 9 units after maybe 6 or 9 months. And then the next year she was at 90 units. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? Huh? What? And that's when I learned about partnerships and JVs. And I knew this stuff existed, right? But I didn't think it was right for me. And it wasn't until this person who I knew, I saw her grow her portfolio like that. And then she sat me down and told me exactly what she did. And then I got a mentor. And my mentor told me exactly what he does and how to do it. And that's when it became clear to me. And I just say this because while I'm very intelligent, I don't think I've done anything that you can't do, right? All you have to do is surround yourself with the right people. If you've got the drive, the energy, the passion, if this is something that's important to you and you're surrounding yourself with the right people, then this vision can become a reality. But that network and that community is absolutely critical because if you don't have that, either you're going to invest and something's going to go wrong. Like you said, you had properties that didn't cash flow. I've had properties that didn't cash flow. I had flip projects where we've lost money. When you hit those hurdles, the gut reaction is to quit. That's just what our human nature is. So it helps to have that community that can help you work through it, recognize what you did wrong, where the mistakes were made, and get through that to continue investing, as opposed to saying this is too risky. I'm going to just go back to my 401k. Jim, you got anything to say to build on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I met someone who'd invested in a syndication was guy Steve Sue. He's one of the founders of Left Field Investors now. But I remember the first conversation he and I had about passive investing, and I said, "Hey, I'm investing with this operator," and he said, "Me too." And the sense of relief, like he's a doctor, he's a smart guy. Oh my gosh, he's doing the same thing. So I didn't just wire money to some crook somewhere that's gonna, he's like, no, I'm in. Not only that, he was in the same deal, and the sense of
Nice.
relief. That's what
Yeah.
it just made me feel confident because sending a wire is scary. I've sent 100 wires and I still get nervous, right? But finding out that Steve had done the same deal as I had with the same sponsor just gave me so much confidence. And then you go and talk to other people and you find out, okay, they were in a couple of deals, similar stuff. And it just gives you confidence. It doesn't mean that, all the deals are going to be perfect and go well, but it just means that, okay, you feel a little bit better and you can dig in more and keep going along that path and have that journey. And that's where I think a community really helps because, if you're investing in the stock market, okay, you can put your money in. If someone says, "Hey, Apple's horrible," you can take it right out if you believe that person, right? But these are long-term, illiquid investments that are completely out of your control. So you want to have some confidence that you're putting your money in the right place. And that's where talking to a group of people can help you because you're going to get a lot of different opinions on each deal, each operator, and you're going to learn a lot more quickly that way.
Jim, with that said, the challenge that a lot of investors face is figuring out, one, where to find operators and sponsors, how to vet them. What are some of the tips and advice you can share on that?
Yeah, that's the number one question we have, or how do you find a good sponsor? And I kind of have a journey, three-step journey that brought me to what I do now. And I think it's instructive to tell you how I started. And when I first went to that seminar I was talking about, real estate guys, I had a bucket of money in an old IRA, so it was a self-directed IRA, and I knew I wouldn't need it for a while. And I'm like, this is my risky bucket. I'm gonna go for it. So I met syndicators at this seminar, and I was just like, hey, I'm an investor. Here's my money. Here's my money, and I just started handing it out. I did no vetting. I said, well, real estate guys, they're good guys, so these must be great operators, right? Whether it was someone that was speaking on stage or someone was sitting next to me, I was just handing it out. And so I
You
probably
were a
did three or
lot of
four
fun at
investments.
these events, I bet.
Oh, they loved me. They loved me. So anyway, that was not the way to do things, right? Now, some of those investments turned out to be good. Some of them turned out to be fair. One turned out to be horrible. And so what I realized was that's not the way to do it, right? And I should have known that just throwing your money at people, that's not a clever way. So then I thought, okay, I really want to get into this and do a good job. So I started listening to podcasts, reading books, and then I would listen to somebody on a podcast. I'd call them up. Maybe I'd talk to them for 30 minutes or an hour, get to know them. I'd have all these questions. I'd vet them. and then they'd send me a deal, and then maybe I'd call them up and talk to them for another 15 or 30 minutes. And so after that amount of time, having a relationship with someone for maybe a couple of weeks and talking to them for an hour, I had to make the decision, do I send them a wire for $50,000? And that there was a lot more vetting, and I was a lot more comfortable than the first way I did it, right? But I was still nervous. You don't know if someone's a good marketer, a good podcaster, or a good operator, or all of the above, just from a brief conversation. And so most of those deals worked out better, but I still had some issues, right? And so now I have a new way of doing things, and it'll probably change in a couple of years. But right now, I don't invest with a new sponsor unless they are introduced to me by someone I know, like, and trust from my community who is already invested with that sponsor. Now, I still do all of the same due diligence, but trust transfers, right? So I am starting from 100 steps ahead of where I was before, because I already know it doesn't, the person that's recommending them doesn't have to have gone full cycle, just been in the deal for long enough to get some distributions, get some reports, find out that their wire went someplace legitimate, right? And that you're investing in a property and it's sending you cash. That's enough for me to then do my own vetting and get in with that sponsor possibly. So that's what I do now. I rely on my community for referrals, which now in retrospect seems completely like obvious, right? How do you find an attorney? Ask a friend, ask someone you trust. How do you find a financial advisor, a CPA? All these professionals that I'm now using, I get those through referrals from friends. I'm not in the yellow pages or Googling who's a good attorney, right? That seems crazy. So why was I doing that for a syndication operator? Well, I'm not anymore, because I have a community and we bring each other operators and we vet them together. We talk about them. And now we are all better investors because of it. The only thing the weakness in that strategy is if someone isn't part of our community, an operator doesn't, and we don't have an entry point for that person. So for that, and I tell the people right out of the gates, the operators I'm talking to, look, if no one in my community is invested with you and I don't know you, we're going to have to get to know each other. And it might take 6 months or a year before I invest with you, but let's start a relationship. Let's talk. Send me deals. I'll look at them. I'm not investing for at least 6 months or a year. And if the operator understands and says, sounds good, makes sense to me, then we're off. We'll try and see if there's a connection there. If they say, well, that's too long for me, that's easy, right? I just scratch them off the list and move on, because there's a ton of syndicators out there. If someone who's trying to pressure me, I'm done. I'm gone. So that's how I look for operators now, and so far it's been quite successful.
I love the insights there, right? You had a three-step approach, right, to finding and vetting operators. The first step, or the first phase for you, was basically anyone had a deal, I got a check. So you were handing out the money like it was Brewster's Millions. I think this is like the second Brewster's Millions reference I've made in like a couple of months. But
Wow,
anyway,
that's
handing out
crazy.
money left and right here on deals. And then the second option, which is a much better approach, which is actually listening to someone, having some conversations with them, vetting them out through those phone calls. And then third, which is a great way, is obviously doing it through referrals, having people refer, saying, yep, I've worked with this individual on this deal. Here's how they operated. Here's the conversation I had. And then you're still going through your process of vetting them and making sure that it's going to be a good fit. There are a couple of little nuances of what you said that I want to make sure people picked up on. One, you said if someone's going to pressure you, it's an easy no. And I think that's important on both sides of the table. If you're an active investor, if you're trying to raise money for deals, or if you're a passive investor, you don't ever want to be in a situation where there's pressure, right? If you're an active investor, if you're in the salesman mode, you are already taking a loss. You never want to try to push people to invest with you or rush their time horizon, because they need to feel comfortable. This is a big investment for many people. And for them to feel comfortable investing 50K, 100K, whatever it is, they have to be on their own time frame. Now, you can help them with education and answering their questions and being a resource, but you can't make somebody say, hey, you got 3 months or 2 months or 2 weeks or whatever it is to make a decision. You simply have to let them know, listen, our deals are going to be first come, first serve. We'll keep you in mind, or I'll make sure you stay on the list, and you let me know when you're ready, or you let me know what you need to make a decision, or maybe I'll follow up in a couple months, just check in on you and how you're doing. But you can't rush somebody. And on the LP side, you should always feel comfortable and confident with a little bit of nervousness on every investment you make. You should have a little bit of anxiety, but a lot of excitement on the deals you make.
Yeah.
You should obviously make sure you get that wire information completely accurate. I call it, 4 or 5 times checking to make sure every number is accurate before
Yes.
you wire that check. And I'm like you, I still get a little nervous when I wire money, and we're getting money in, and I got to call and make sure to, we got it, and want to let every investor know that we got your wire, because I understand how frustrating, how concerning that can be. I know people who early in their deals, had wire fraud take place and had people just lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, we always get a little bit nervous on stuff like that for sure. But I just think those are really good insights to pick into, because we don't always talk about the dynamic, but I think the communication and just kind of that, I don't want to say gut feel, but the relationship aspect is so key, because these are liquid deals. These are deals where you're going to be in for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, if not longer. Sometimes you can do them short, but typically you're looking at a 3 to 7 year hold. So it is important to make sure that you like the operator, you trust the operator, and you feel like you're in good hands. Work with that individual. You talked about your vetting process. Give us a couple of points. What are some things that you do to actually vet an operator?
Well, as I said, the first thing is have a referral. But after that, it's I'm looking for, and it's difficult because I don't want to exclude new operators, but I would prefer someone who has some experience and has, not many people in this industry, because it's fairly new, this type of syndication stuff, have been through like 2008 and the bad cycles. But I like some experience, whether it's business experience or real estate experience, something. And if a track record is a huge thing. The thing that I most test for is communication, because as we said, these are very illiquid long-term deals. So if you're not going to respond to me when I'm emailing or calling or texting you before I've sent you 50 grand, there's no chance you're going to respond to me after I've wired you the money. And the reason why that's important, there's a few deals I have that I just haven't heard from the operator. And it doesn't matter to me whether they're performing well or poorly. If I'm not hearing from you and getting updates, then I'm nervous because I don't know what you did with my money. And I've had some deals that have gone south from operators that were communicating with me every step of the way. Hey, here's what's happening. Here's why. And I'll reinvest with those guys. Maybe, possibly, probably. But if there's somebody that just is ignoring me, will not communicate with me, and even if they give me the best returns I've ever had, it's going to be hard for me to send you another wire because I've had all this anxiety waiting to see what's happening. So communication is the number one thing I'm looking for. So I test them when they send me a deal. Even if I have no questions, I'll send them an email with 5 or 6 questions on the deal. And I'm looking to see, are you going to give me a timely response and a quality response? If you respond to me and say, hey, all those are answered in the webinar, I will say, yes, I know that because I've already watched the webinar. I want to know that you know your deal, and I want you to take the time to talk to me about it. And if you're not going to, I'm going to move on. There's a bunch of operators out there. I don't need you that bad, right? And that's, we're talking about pressure. Most of the operators don't pressure you, but if you feel that pressure, that's a reason to walk, because you got to think, if there's a lot of operators out there who their deals are done in a day or two because so many investors want to get into them. If you're pressuring me or constantly saying, hey, are you going to invest? Are you going to invest? That makes an investor think you're desperate. You don't have enough investors. And who wants to invest in that deal? So even if you are desperate and you don't have enough, you can't come off acting like that, because people are going to walk away, right? You got to act like, hey, this is a quality deal and you're going to want to get in it, but I'm not going to pressure you. You're going to look at it, and that's going to be enough for you to want to get in it.
Hey, listen, you just gave some phenomenal insights, both for the active investor and the passive investor. And I hope our listeners rewind that back, because you want to always operate from a position of strength. If you're an active investor, you want to step back. You never want to be desperate. You never want to be in a position where you feel like you need someone, but you also want to focus on the customer service side of this. And this is a business. My background before getting into real estate was in marketing. More specifically, I did a lot of account management. So I was the liaison between kind of our agency and our clients. And that's all communication. And communication is key. If something bad is happening, you just got to let them know, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing to fix it. Here's, what our plan is, or here's what we're working through. And yes, you might get some people who are really upset about it, but in the long run, they're going to respect the fact that you were present, you stood up, you told them what was going on, you were proactive in trying to resolve the issue. And those are the kind of people who are going to get repeat business even if the returns or results weren't exactly what they thought it was going to be up front. Versus, and you said it, sometimes you could crush it on a deal, but the experience was lacking. And I've had this where people said, like, hey, really enjoy working with you, but kind of, either that partner or the team you worked with on that one, I'm not sure I want to work with them again. Right. And it's just because of, again, whether it be communication things or whatever the case may be, all that's important to people because at the end of the day, we don't really, I don't know about you, but I don't sit there and track every single dollar of what I made on this. Typically we're going to go off of, well, how do I feel working with that person? Did I have a good experience with them? Do I feel good about them? Do I like them? Do I feel like they're taking care of me? And if I felt good working with them, then I'm likely going to work with them again. If I didn't feel good working with them, well, they're off my list. So I think some of that, is important as well. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and did you hit your IRR? Did you not hit your IRR? But a lot of it is going to be about relationships and communication, and you've got to prioritize that. Hey, real quick, there's a question you had on your sheet that I got to ask you because I've never heard of it before. And it's about a lazy 1031. What exactly is that?
So a lazy 1031 is what my accountant calls kind of when you invest in syndications and do cost seg and bonus depreciation, you get a lot of passive loss built up. And the example I use is when I was selling all of my active real estate, I had a bunch of capital gains, obviously. So I went to my accountant and I said, what am I going to do? And he said two things. First thing he said was, Jim, sometimes when you make a bunch of money, you got to pay taxes. I wasn't happy with that answer. The second answer, he said, you could do the lazy 1031. So basically what that is instead of a regular 1031 that has all kinds of restrictions on timing and you have to upgrade to a bigger deal and all that, this is basically you take all passive loss from real estate offsets passive gain from real estate. So I had all this passive gain, and I just took the capital that I got from the sales and I invested it in syndications that had big cost segregations that were going to give me a lot of bonus depreciation. So I got from between probably 60% and in one case 110% of the investment amount was a passive loss in year one. So all of those losses offset all of the gains in my from my active sales. And so I didn't pay any tax on all those gains, right? So then what happens is now I have all these syndications. When they go full cycle, I will have big gains again, plus something called depreciation recapture, because the depreciation is on either a 27 and a half or a 10-year scale. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but you have to pay tax on some of that if you sell early. But every time you invest in a new deal, you get a new huge bucket of loss that you can use to offset gains. So the lazy 1031 is just using your passive losses to offset your gains using syndications. And then we have what's called the golden hamster wheel, right? Some people call it that, at least is you to be able to never pay that tax again, you have to keep investing in more and more syndications to keep building up that passive loss. So it's really like the reason we call it a lazy 1031 is because it's similar to a 1031 in that you can defer and avoid the tax legally, but you don't have to jump through all those hoops of owning a property and all that other stuff. So we call it the lazy 1031. It's been working for me. I don't pay very much in tax and certainly none on my real estate investments because of that. And when you're first getting into syndications, the great thing about it is you get these big buckets of loss, but you don't have any gain yet to offset it. So in the first few years, if you're not selling active stuff like I did, because that took up a lot of it, but in the first few years as a passive investor, you could build up a pretty good bank that could pay off for years to come. So the lazy 1031 is just deferring your taxes through investing in syndications and staying in the passive real estate bucket.
I love it. Listen, there are a lot of perks about syndication investing. You just laid out one of the big ones with the tax advantages that are there. If anyone wants to learn more about you or Left Field Investors, they can check out your website, leftfieldinvestors.com. And then you are also the host of the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. So check that out anywhere you listen to podcasts. Right now, we're going to move on to a round of insights. You ready? Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Well, we talked about it already, but being a poor asset manager on my actively managed properties showed me that the better solution was to hire a professional asset manager, which led me to be a full-time passive investor, which has opened up all kinds of opportunities for me, from the Left Field Investors group to having more time freedom and financial freedom being a full-time passive investor. So your journey, you have to go through things to get to the end, right? If I hadn't been a poor asset manager, I'd probably still be active, right? Which would be great, but it would also change the way my lifestyle is and all of that. So I'm happy for the journey, but being bad at being an asset manager really opened me up and allowed me to be successful as a passive investor.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
So I use Visor. It's a tool that it's a wealth management tool, but it was invented, or not invented, but I don't know, produced, however you say it, by two guys that they had a big exit on some other deal. And so they became passive investors in real estate syndications, and they found out that there was no way to track that stuff. And I don't know, I have like 3 Excel spreadsheets that clash and fight each other, and we're all in a battle every month to track my distributions and all that other stuff. Now I go to Visor, and it's 2 clicks and my distributions are in there. Everything's in one place. I can even add any other assets I have in this wealth, because they're building a full wealth management tool, but it's optimized for the passive investor. So I love it. Visor.
I love it. Listen, we just had Litan Yahav on the show. And
yes.
yeah, so we had a great interview with him. So this is very timely, and Visor is definitely a great tool. So we'll make sure we link to not just Visor, but also that episode Litan in the show notes there. All right, give me a book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Hands Off Investor by Brian Burke. It is by far the #1 book, I believe, for a passive investor. It starts as if you know nothing, and then at the end, you feel like you have a PhD in syndication investing. It talks about how to vet a sponsor, how to analyze a deal, what metrics to look at. It's phenomenal. Usually, I'm not very good at reading books. I get, 3 or 4 chapters in, and then squirrel, I go find a different book. This one, I read a couple times. I took 15 pages of notes. It's dog-eared. I love it. It's a great book.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I walk at least an hour every day. Since I work from home, I kind of use that as replacing my commute to work. I listen to podcasts. I relax. It's just a really nice way to start my day. It really gets me going. And I find out when I don't do that, my days usually don't turn out as well as when I do it. So that's my habit. I go for a walk every day.
What's your #1 insight for passive investing?
I've been talking about it the whole time, but it's a community. You need a community to be successful at this, because going alone as an investor in passive real estate is difficult. You're not going to get the quality sponsors. You just can't do it. So using a community is the #1 way. And as I said, we have our community, Left Field Investors. There's other communities out there. You need to find a community where the culture of that community fits your personality. And there's different types out there. Some are kind of uptight and really, I don't know how to say it, but just a little bit uptight, and that's fine. If that's how you are, that's fine. If you want a more relaxed community, you go to a different one. You just need to find one that fits you. And I can't say it enough, but the community has helped me become the investor I am today. We started Left Field Investors 2 years ago, and I've gained the most out of this community. I thought I would be teaching everybody and showing everybody the way, and I've learned more from someone who hasn't even done their first investment yet than anybody else. So I just can't say enough, join a community.
Great insight right there. All right, let's lighten the mood. You're not too far away from me, up there in Columbus, Ohio. So give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh man. Okay, so if you like Columbus style pizza, which I don't know if people know this, but there's Detroit pizza, New York pizza, and Chicago pizza. There's also Columbus pizza, and it's different than everywhere else. And I would go to Tommy's. If you want a steak, I'd go to the Avenue, and if you want a burger, I'd go to Thurman. So I have 3 there because I couldn't decide between all of them.
I love it, man. Listen, as a fellow Ohioan, born and raised in Cleveland, went to school in Dayton, lives in Cincinnati now. I've also lived in Detroit and Chicago. I have never heard of Columbus style pizza. So that's a new one for me, and I'll have to look into that and understand it. But being in Chicago and Detroit for so long, those 2 are super high up on my list, and obviously New York style pizza as well. But we'll have to check out Columbus style pizza and do our own research there, because this is the first time I'm hearing about that. So I'm a little surprised myself. But listen, I loved our conversation, Jim. You did a great job just talking about kind of how you went from being a teacher to a financial advisor, and then learning about real estate and realizing that, you know what, I really believe more in investing in these physical assets and real estate as opposed to kind of these paper backed assets. This is what I need to focus on. Going from the active side to the LP side, and then helping us understand your process for vetting syndications and vetting sponsors and being a part of a community and why that's so important to see success. Again, if you want to learn more about Jim or being a part of the Left Field Investors community, check out leftfieldinvestors.com and also check out the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Jim, thank you again for coming on the show today. We hope you have a great one and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.